when you think of the mercy, I want you to, before I even start talking about the mercy of Allah, I want you to think in your mind about what you think of when you think of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because essentially the meaning of mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal for every single one of us will be different. And the reason for that is because the manifestation of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal is variant and unlimited. There's so many different types of manifestations of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal in our lives, that in every person's life, that mercy of Allah will be different. So you might see something to be mercy that another person doesn't see to be mercy as well. Another person may see something else, something to be mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal that you may not see to be mercy as well. Some person might consider something to be absolute torment, but in your life that happens to be a mercy, right? And that's why they say, مصائب قوم عند قوم فوائد, that the calamities of one group of people, they end up becoming fawaid, benefits for another group of people. So mercy is very personalized. This is the mercy of Allah. It's very personalized. So your relationship with Allah, when it comes to the mercy of Allah, it's a personal relationship, because you are going to perceive that mercy in a different way. I am going to perceive that mercy in a different way. So immediately we know that this mercy is something very personal to each person. Similarly, if you think about it, your relationship with a mother is a very personal relationship as well. And essentially the word rahma, it comes from the word rahim, which is the womb of a mother. Because a mother, because of that attachment through the womb, is so connected to the child. And such is the case with you and Allah Azza wa Jal, and I and Allah Azza wa Jal. Just as that motherly relationship between a child and his mother or her mother is there because of how the mother is so directly connected to this child, so too is Allah Azza wa Jal directly connected to his slave, not physically so, but because of your relationship with Allah, because of your privacy with Allah, because of your personal relationship and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you think of mercy, you will think of mercy in one way. When I think of mercy, I'll think of mercy in another way. And that's the first point that I wanted to mention. Remember, every time you think of rahmah, you're thinking of a personal relationship and bond that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, and this is another very important point. By the way, this is when it comes to the mercy, and this is when it comes to many of the other sifat of Allah Azza wa Jal as well. What you see to be kindness from Allah may not necessarily be the case for another person, right? Because again, some people's calamities are other people's benefits. Think about it. If you have a person who's going through a drought and they have nothing to eat or drink, if you give them some food, that will be perceived by one person to be mercy, but another person might say, well, I don't have this to eat or that to eat. Or maybe that food for that person might be mercy, but another person has digestive problems and they can't have that food. But one thing is for sure, every person is consistently going through the mercy of Allah. How do we know this? We know this because Allah has two attributes or two names for mercy for himself. And one of them is Alrahman. And Alrahman is that merciful Lord who's merciful to everyone. He's merciful to the young. He's merciful to the old. He's merciful to the person who's going through difficult circumstances and times, and a person who's going through ease, and a person who's going through comfort. Allah has that rahmah for every single person, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rahmanud dunya wal akhirah. He's the person that is the Rahman of this dunya and the hereafter, and he's the person who's Rahman to the Muslim and the Kafir. But when it comes to the believers, Allah has another, even more specific mercy. So yes, everybody's going to be a recipient of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jalla, but in some limits. There are those people who believe in Allah. They, Allah always has a greater example, but I'll give it to you like this. If there's a person you really believed in throughout his or her life, and you stood by his or her side, and you always were there for them, when the time comes, when they succeed finally, they will be there for you as well, right? Similarly, and Allah of course has a greater example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his example is وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. He has a greater example. Those people who believe in Allah, they trust Allah, they put their trust in Allah, they accept what Allah has sent. Do you think Allah will treat those people in the same way? No. And that's why Allah says, وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا. Allah is merciful with this very specific type of mercy to the believers and not everybody. So there's a rahma al-wasi'ah, because Ar-Rahman is the rahmat al-wasi'ah, the one who has this expansive mercy. And then there's Ar-Rahim, the one who is the rahmat al-wasilah, the one who has a mercy that reaches and achieves and goes and gets places. So that is the two different names. Those are the two different names of Allah Azza wa Jal, within which this sifa, this attribute of Allah is there. Dhul Rahmatil Wasi'ah and Dhul Rahmatil Wasilah. Now, I want you to stop at those names and think about your attainment of this mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal.